This is Samantha Mann on chapters 1 through 5 in our data analysis book for continuing school improvement. Chapter 1 was a basic kind of introduction, why we need to commit to this, using data for continuous school improvement, and kind of some reasons on why you need to focus on teaching everything instead of just one subject. And talks about the purpose of the book, that is inspiring school districts to commit to a continuous school improvement framework that will result in an improving school teaching for every teacher and improving learning for every student through comprehensive use of data. So that framework is in chapter 2. Chapter 2, figure 2.1 on page 14 has 5 different leading questions on each of them. Where are we now is the first one, and then it has all the different sub questions, and it does it with 5 different ones that has sub questions. So the 5 questions are: where are we now? How did we get to where we are? Where do we want to be? How are we going to get to where we want to be? And what are we doing to make a difference? And that's how all of this is laid out, is with those questions and then sub questions, and each chapter goes into each sub question in a ton of detail to help better understand how to use the framework and to implement it for that continuous improvement. So chapter 3 starts out with that first question, where are we now? But it starts with the sub question of who we are, which goes into demographic data. Demographic data is different in schools as far as it's not ethnicity, race, origin, gender, those types of things. It's more about the number of students in school, the number of students with special needs, the number of students in GT, attendance rates, graduation and dropout rates, number of teachers by years and experience, number of teachers by subject, those types of things. And it states that demographic data shows the philosophy of the school through indicators of which and how students are disciplined, identified for special education, advancement placements, and gifted programs, etc. And it tells you when you're reviewing this demographic data, you need to ask, what do we want it to look like? And how or what do we need to get there? And it has a few other things in there, but one of the main things I wanted to pull out of this chapter was the desegregation. It was a newer term to me that it clarified really well for me in this book. It talks about desegregation as this separation of results into subgroups that make up the population. The reason you want to desegregate this data to subgroup the demographic data is to allow us to isolate variations among different student groups, to understand if all students are achieving or experience school in the same way, and to know if there is something the adults need to learn about particular student groups to better meet their needs. So going into chapter 4 is another sub-question, how do we do business? And it goes into perceptions data. Perception is kind of just what you see, what you observe. And it's answered, the how we do business is answered through assessing the school's culture, climate, and organizational processes. And it's talking about how you can assess perceptions through common approaches such as interviews, focus groups, questionnaires, self-assessment tools, those types of things. And then it goes into changing perceptions. And the most effective way to change perception is through behavior changes. So improving understanding through awareness and experience. Another cognitive dissonance was in there about The discomfort one feels when holding two thoughts, opinions, or ideas that are inconsistent. It creates perception changes when people experience a conflict between what they believe and what they've experienced. And then another way to change perceptions is to communicate transparent information. And it listed that because when you don't give all the information, a lot of times we just assume other information, that people will assume just random stuff or things that doesn't actually go with what's going on, and can misunderstand what's going on. So chapter 5 is how are your students doing, and that's one of the first, or the sub questions of the first, where are we now? And it talks about student learning and the need for multiple and ongoing measures to understand what students know as a result of instruction, what teachers are teaching, and which students need extra help and on what. And then use that information to adjust instruction to meet the needs of every student. It went into a lot of information, chapter 5 did, about how assessments is used for 3 main purposes, and then analyzing the results descriptively, which is the basic characteristics, and then analyzing the results inferentially, which is the more complex characteristics. And they have figures on pages 70 through 75 that go into more detail as far as terms, definitions, effective uses, and even cautions. And the chapter wraps up with talking about the validity and reliability of assessments, and it lists, how an assessment may be valid and how one might be reliable. And you would think if one's valid, it's reliable, but there's actually a test may be reliable without being valid, but it cannot be valid without being reliable. Thanks.